got a lot of static.
Well, hello again. This is another daily dose with Philip Steiger at thebest3d.com and using PD Howler. Now, some of the features I'm going to show you today here you can probably use in PD Pro version 4 or 5, maybe even version 3.5. What I'd like to do is show you, get your attention to some of the tutorials that are there on the website. And there's a bunch that you may have seen here on creating textures and also doing some lighting on them. Let's have a look at the textures, particularly the rock video. There's some really interesting techniques here that utilize, let's see if we can scan forward there. Yeah, see this? Utilize the gradient, but in a non-replace mode, rather in a mode where it's only going to show it if it is brighter or if it's darker than what's already there. So let's dive right in and see how it works. Here's actually sort of a result that I want to get out of that. Let's go back in time and start from scratch. Alright, so initially you may have a white background and you go to the gradients and there's a linear gradient tool right there. Alright, so normally you draw it, nothing happens. No, that's not true. Normally when you're in opaque mode, that's the default, you'll see a gradient like this, right? Especially if you have the default gradients that might go from black to white. There you go. Now let's say you want to apply it only where where it's brighter than what's already there. Alright, so let's say you start with a black background and sure enough the bright part will show. But what you do is you say, okay, let's show it only if it's greater than what's already there. So now you can still do this one on that side where it was all dark to begin with, but when you go over here it's not going to replace. See that the black side on this here doesn't show over on this side, and same thing here. You basically contain it, right? Or you can also do the opposite. If you start from a white and you go to the mode that says show me what's less than or what's already there, you will be essentially subtracting from it. One thing though is that it's quickly getting too dark there too. So one thing you could do is with the gradient editor here you can control the opacity and make that go down to 0 and down to the 0 on that side too. Smooth it a little bit if you must, but then you essentially have a gradient that's not going to be all destructive outside of his reach. Okay, now one thing that you may want to do is have it a little bit darker. There you go. So you see you can now in these modes, the less than or the greater than mode, you can make some interesting new types of textures, because essentially, let's say if we start with black, there you go, you're adding to it only where the gradient is brighter than what's already there. Alright, and so this creates some really fancy, look at that, I'm just going randomly babbling around here and it creates very quickly some patterns you might have seen if you ever collected as a kid some rocks, like crystals. You might see sand crystals. If you go to the filter and stylize it like this, you can easily create some lighting effects that will remind you of those. You can of course also change the color of the light source, make it a little bit closer to the bottom or brighten it, reduce the contrast. That looks a little bit more sandy like. Then also reduce the fine detail if you want to have more smoothness on that. Anyway, so that's an idea for a starting point. Now we'll use one more thing, which is a different type of texture. This one here, I have another texture, or rather another pattern, in which it's actually going from black to white and back to black. And in this case I don't need to use the opacity, because when I'm drawing this, the first one will show, the next one will only show where it is brighter than what's already there. Okay, because I'm currently in greater than mode, or brighter or greater, same thing, right? So I can go and create all sorts of interesting patterns again. Let's create one where we have sort of a V shape. So we have one on this one, another one on this side, or maybe an X, right? But the point is that there are some dark spots and there are some bright spots. Some peaks. You can also have this, by the way, as it's going up. This is right now a linear progression. You can have it a cubic interpolation, and then that way it won't show you that ridge so much, like it comes up and then there's a little bit of a ridge there. That might be a little bit smoother if you do it this way, right? With the smoother interpolation, cubic interpolation. Whichever method you use. Let's go back to this one. And now the other thing that I'd like to do is to have little dimples and holes in there. But I only want them where they are actually going to be close to the top. I don't want the dimples and holes at the bottom. All right, so here's a way to do that again. If I go temporarily to my swap buffer, let's see, image, jump to the swap buffer. Oh, I happen to have another one here. Let's erase that, right? Actually, let's erase it to white, or we can simply change this, right? So jump back and forth with the J for jumping, swap buffer, main buffer. You can see up here in the corner, upper left corner, main buffer or swap, main swap, main swap. Alright, so in the swap buffer, I'm going to draw little dots, little holes, and for that I'm going to use a different texture, maybe this one here, which goes from black to white. And I want to make sure the opacity is fully there on both ends. Okay, so at that point I could, for instance, use the circular gradient and draw a circle in a mode, let's just go to regular mode here, opaque mode. There you go. So that makes a nice little hole, right? Essentially, if this is a gray map or an elevation map, white represents the very highest part, and then it goes down into a pit. Perhaps this is too much of a flat there, so let's go all the way to the left edge. There you go. Alright, something like this. Now we might even pick this up as a custom brush. Let's go to custom brush pickup tool here and pick that up and then paint with that, right? Or we could go, actually probably the simplest way is to simply go to the settings on the brush tool and make sure you choose the custom brush and set your size of the custom brush right there. Perhaps also the bias, so it's got a little bit of a peak towards the center, and then just draw. Oh yeah, so now the idea is to go to the brush settings here and set the steps pretty high. There you go. And then also the size, and now since it's a custom brush, we need to make sure we allow it to change the size. So then we can change the size a little bit here and make very small dimples, very small dots and holes, right? And the idea is to have these generally not go all the way down to black. If you did this, if you went to the image and expand dynamic range, they would definitely go all the way to black at the center. Maybe we don't need that. Maybe we want them a little bit faded into a dark gray, but not all the way down to black. So one way to do that is to adjust the value, and you see the whole histogram here of where the colors actually reside. If you look at the default we currently have, when you make it go darker, everything shifts to the left, to the black side. And if you go to the brighter side, everything shifts to the right. What you want to do is perhaps have it reach somewhere around the center point on this line here. So you can have some darker and some brighter, and everything kind of shifts into that right half. Okay, so with that, and you want to make sure that it's fully saturated on the right side, so that it does actually go to fairly bright. Okay, let's see if we can get something. Let's get something like this here. Okay, whichever. I mean, you need to experiment with this a little bit, right? And then also change the density of these. Perhaps have even a few more of these. Okay, just paint over that. And now, by the way, if we were to look at this in the stylize, the 3D lighting tool, it would basically look like holes, right? These are on a flat surface, and the lighting will look at this grayscale value on each of those dimples and make it look like there's a hole there. Alright, let's go and actually now blend this together with the other image. Remember the other image that's in the main buffer? Let's jump back to that. Still has this showing.